All right, let's go ahead and start the Midrash. But before we do that, of course, let's close out what we were just doing, enjoying some lovely food and some spicy rice. The text of Devarim 8 verse 10 says, "We have eaten and so you will eat and be satisfied. You will bless Adonai your God for the good land He's given us." Let's do that. Abba, we have eaten and we're satisfied. We thank you for the land. In Yeshua's name, we thank you. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so this is the portion that we read. So this is the Midrash on the portion, really only is covering the Torah. This is the readings that we did. You notice there's chapter 32 had a versification difference in it. This brings us to the first verse. Vayishlach is what the name of it is, and that's what caused the name of our portion to be called Vayishlach, the first word. And you see that this is it says verse 4 up there in the Tanakh, in an Art Scroll Tanakh, for example, it'll sometimes have a verse there, either the number 4 or a letter representing it based on Hebrew. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet would be the letter that would represent that. And so, continue on now with the first and only mitzvah that's counted from this portion is from 32, 33, or 32, depending on your translation. It says, "Do not eat the sinew of the thigh." And when we read that, the text actually doesn't tell us to not do it. It tells us that's why it's not done, but it's counted as one of the 613 mitzvot anyway. And the commentary doesn't really, the commentary doesn't really shed much light on why it's considered a command. It's more like almost as if it's an afterthought. In other words, it's made a command, but the Torah doesn't call it a command, but just explains why it's done that way. The text itself of this of where the mitzvah is derived, it's in 32, either 33 or 32, depending on your translation. As I said, it's basically the last second. It's really the last verse of the portion.
That is why to this day the Israelites don't eat the thigh muscle that is at Jacob's socket, because he struck Jacob's hip socket at the thigh muscle.
Right. And so this is called a mitzvah to not do that. So if you were in a kosher butcher shop, really they won't even use pretty much the back half of the animal to avoid trespassing this mitzvah. And the commentary reads, two primary issues are forbidden in the hindquarter: the inner sinew, the sciatic nerve, which branches out from the rear of the spinal column and runs down the inner side of the animal's leg, is forbidden by Torah law. The outer sinew, the common peroneal nerve, which runs across the thigh on the outer side of the animal's leg, is forbidden by the sages. So to avoid doing that, typically the back half animal is typically not consumed, or at least it won't become a kosher steak.
Wasteful.
So this is the first verse, and what is unusual about this verse? Or better said, how does it read differently than the translation that's in front of you?
Typically, you won't see the words angels, but you'll see messengers. Same word though, right?
Yes.
Malak, Malakim.
Yes. And even in the Art Scroll interlinear, it says messengers there. But here's the comment. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Verse 1 in 32 says Jacob went on his way and God's angels met him. And then in verse 3 it says Jacob sent messengers ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't, it like seems to separate it.
Well, as you probably know, Moses didn't write chapters and verses there. And Moses actually didn't divide the Torah portions as they're read either. And in fact, Moses wasn't here for these events. So it was a translator that decided to call it angels in one passage and messengers in the other, because it's in chapter 32, verse 1, it's the same word as in chapter 32, verse 4 or 3, depending on your translation. Malachim. Now, it shouldn't be too surprising here. There are differing opinions about this. So ArtScroll did translate it as angels, following Rashi, if you read it from the Stone Edition Tanakh. And the commentary reads, he sent real angels, said Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki, in order to both impress and terrify Esau. This teaches that righteous people are greater than angels, for when Jacob had need of emissaries, he had the right to summon angels to do his bidding. According to another view in the Midrash and the commentators, Jacob's emissaries were human. The word Malachim can be rendered either as angels or as human emissaries, as we've just been sort of discussing. So is there anything in the text that would preclude one translation over the other? In other words, is there any definitive, is there anything definitive that says, no, this can't be this because of this passage?
Well, the way mine is separating it in verses 1 and 2, it says, Jacob went on his way and God's angels met him. When he saw them, Jacob said, this is God's camp. So we'll call this place Mahanaim. And then
Mahanaim. 2 camps.
And then in verse 3, it's a whole new thing where Jacob sent messengers ahead of him.
So in other words, why couldn't have been sending messengers that he had met from the camp to go out and do it.
It doesn't say either way.
Now, I couldn't find anything in here that tells us that it couldn't have been real angels, as Rashi said, but there's nothing in here that requires it. It would seem to me that if it were real angels, it seems to me that it would have got more of a reaction about what and why Esau was a little more congenial than he otherwise could have been. He's coming with 400 men, which is a division of military. It's one of, typically, as said in medieval times or ancient times, rather, at least a 400 is 1/40 of the whole force. So he's coming with a military force in order to do something. And you're not just traveling 400 guys because you're your closest and nearest, dearest friends. You're coming because, you're expecting trouble, or you're going to cause trouble. One of the two.
Yeah. Tradition always points out, I think, especially in Talmud and in those writings, that he came specifically to do harm to Jacob. That's the tradition, anyway. I'm going to get this guy. He swore
His
a
last
few chapters
words,
ago where I'm going to kill him.
Yeah, that was the last thing. The last thing that's recorded of him saying about him, not the meeting. I think the last meeting of them was really at the when they're exchanging birthright for stew, so to speak.
Go ahead.
So the idea here is that it could have been either one, but I think that had it really been angels, Esau acted as if he had something going on where he didn't actually, he sounded a lot more conciliatory than Jacob thought it was going to be. And was it because angels visited him? I mean, we know that angels or a dream did come to Laban. It says in this text, a dream came to him where he's supposed to do, not do good or bad, as it says to Yaakov. And he got the dream. We probably would have seen, my guess, probably, although absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, that he would have commented on, I saw your angels came back to me. What the book of Jasher says about it is that these were actual angels that visited Esau multiple times. And that's why Esau was conciliatory. Again, that's the book of Joshua, not necessarily Tanakh. So, what is the response on meeting his brother? What does Jacob do? Well, he does three courses of action. And the first one, he divides. Why does he divide? He doesn't want everyone killed in the first contact.
Right.
There's a saying that we've all heard. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. At this point, all of Jacob's eggs are all together in one basket. He's trying to put them in two baskets here. Now, he actually, this is separated into two companies, but the next chapter we see, if you turn ahead for a moment to chapter 33, he actually divided his camp into three. He has the
There were the two camps, and then him and his wives and children.
well, there's
Sounds like
the way I'm reading it, it's chapter 33, verse 1. He saw Esau coming. So this is continuing on. So Yaakov divided the children between Leah, Rachel, and the two slave girls or servant girls, the maids, putting the slave girls and their children first. So the handmaidens are first, and their children. The second group, Leah and her kids. And last, Rachel and Yosef. So I'm looking at it as saying he's putting his least valuable folks up front. Then in order of value, Leah and her kids are next. And finally, the wife he really loves, Rachel, as there. So he's still dividing his camp, still making, they can't get us all. We'll make contact with the least important group, the scouts. No, the least important group here is, as he has the servant girls and their kids up front.
Mm-hmm.
So the next course of action we read about chronologically here, second, is to pray. Now, interestingly, the prayer that he makes is such that he is really willing. He's asking for help here. It's interesting that he even still he refers to God as God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac to start with. And that's interesting, but it's the way he's doing it, the way he's praying it, is reminding Yah of what the promises were to his father Jacob and his grandfather, or Jacob's father Isaac and his grandfather Abraham. But then something interesting is mixed in here too. This translation reads in verse 11, "I have been diminished." In this verse, could be verse 10 in your translation. This is also in the complete Jewish Bible as, "I am not worthy of all the love." I like that idea better. I think that it fits what's about to happen. He not only is asking for help, he is realizing that he's not worthy of all the blessings that he's got to date.
Yeah, mine says the same thing, that I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness
Mm-hmm.
for sharing your servant.
And then it reminds him in verse 13. Yes.
Back to a previous thing,
Mhm.
you were wondering about the evidence that he sent angels ahead of him as his messengers. If he's asking God for help at this point, would the power angels have? If he had sent angels ahead of him, I don't think he'd be so worried, would he?
I don't know. He's making three courses of action because he's concerned that one of them by itself isn't going to work. So he's not just going to stop with prayer either, right?
Right.
I mean, arguably you would put prayer. If you look at it in hindsight, you say, well, you know what? I should have prayed first instead of taking action. So you want to probably, I think that a lesson learned from this during and after action is course of action 1 should be prayer, and then 2 and 3 could follow that. But then he's coming to verse on this. It's either 12 or 11. It says, "Rescue me from my brother, for I fear him lest he come and strike me down, mother and children." Now, since I have a this different translations read different, of course, but he'll come and attack me without regard for mothers or children. One a kind of a commentary from the Reform Chumash says mothers falling on children, and falling is in parentheses there. It's not actually in the text, but the idea being mothers on children as if mothers are being killed on top of their kids, which the text note said this brings the vivid imagery of many times during the Shoah, during the Holocaust, where Nazi soldiers would shoot the women and they'd fall down on top of their kids, or shoot them both at the same time, both dying at the same time. Plenty of the massacre eyewitness reports indicate that, and there's even some photographic evidence that happened somewhat frequently during that time. So it is a worthy prayer to pray that, to make sure that doesn't happen. And he concludes the prayer part with the promise that he'll make your seed, your offspring, like the sand of the sea, too numerous to count. And course of action 3 is, it's not bribery, right? It's bringing a blessing to your brother. And we don't really know the reason for the numbers of these things, except for they're pretty good sized numbers. What does 200 mean? 200, 20, 30, and 40 in this sense, 20 and 10. But there's a sizable number of animals here that he's trying to give to his brother as a blessing, giving gifts to soften perhaps the attack. And so he doesn't come up with just one course of action, he comes up with 3. And the commentators talk about these being sort of contradictory courses of action. Here's our Art Scroll commentary. It says, that Jacob could dedicate himself with conviction to contradictory courses of action is testimony to his self-discipline. He could cast his lot with God, yet not fail to make the necessary human responses to a crisis. He could recognize an element of justice in Esau's hurt at losing the blessings, yet prepare for an attack as if there was no defense but his own strong arms. Next slide is, this chapter teaches that Israel in exile must always be able to recognize and act upon the varying and sometimes conflicting elements in any situation. And think about in modern times, and as well as ancient times, Israel may pray for protection against their enemies, but they also have tanks and air defense systems to protect them. So is that a contradictory course of action?
No.
I don't think so.
In some people's eyes.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you don't see, there's a very famous vignette, I believe it's by Avigdor Kahalani, the Israeli officer, a commander at the Golan Heights defense, talked about he was being approached by a bunch of soldiers coming up the hill. He's basically by himself, and the the soldiers basically saw him and then ran away. And some of them were captured later and asked why they run away. And they said, well, obviously all the angels that were standing behind you. So that does, I think, speak of what of Yah's interest in protecting Israel. So we get to the kind of another controversial section here. Yaakov wrestled, and this is it's really odd the way it starts out, right? Then Jacob was left alone, and as some translations read, and some man wrestled with him till daybreak. So how did that occur? How did that wrestling match just
And
out of
why?
nowhere? Why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did it escalate in the next verse to say wrestling with
Give me your name.
Well,
Next verse, it was
Elohim,
part
yeah.
of the same verse.
Tell me your
It said,
name.
Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. It's all the same.
Happens all the
verse.
time, right? So it's a very strange passage here, no doubt. We continue reading the next verse 26, or depending on translation. He said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." He said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God, Elohim, and with men, and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. So Yaakov named the place Peniel, for he said, "I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved." So the question is, with whom did Yaakov wrestle? The text in the Torah here says it's a man, right?
Mhm.
Considering it was a man, and basically said that, and the way he was entreating him sounded like he was entreating God, and admitted that very much by naming it what he did. He was talking to Yeshua.
Well, if it was, I mean, here's the thing: if the Torah says it's a man, and the word in Torah is man, but
Then it even says he wrestled with God and man.
The only person that fits that bill is Yeshua.
so the
Not only that, but also the way he says, "Why is it that you ask my name?" That sounds very much like what Yeshua said, some things that Yeshua would ask in the New Testament.
he's answering his question with a question, isn't he?
Very Jewish.
Well, this passage can be, I think, further wrestled with by going to Hosea chapter 12. Sorry about that, guys. Apologies. The text tells us that this kind of starts in verse 1. Really, the primary verses are on the next slide. We'll start with the statement. Ephraim is feeding on wind and pursuing an east wind all the day. He increases falsehood and ruin. You make a covenant with Asher, and oil is sent to Mitzrayim. And Yahweh has a controversy with Yehuda to punish Yaakov according to his ways, to repay him according to his deeds. He took his brother by the heel in the womb, and in his strength he strove with Elohim. So Israel means strives with El, strives with God. So strove with Elohim is what he did. Continue on to verse 4. He strove with the messenger and overcame. He wept and sought his favor. So verse 3 is in parallel with verse 4. He strove with Elohim. He strove with the Malach, the messenger, and overcame. He wept and sought his favor. He found him in Bethel, and there he spoke to us. Even Yahweh, Elohim of hosts, Yahweh is his remembrance, or his name. Therefore, return to your Elohim, guard kindness and right ruling, and wait on your Elohim continually. So we have this individual who is called a man, who's called Elohim, who's called a messenger, Malach, and it seems to me this is parallel. It ends with Yahweh Tzevaot, or the God of armies. I think you look at it and you wonder, okay, if this is Yeshua, why would he injure Yaakov?
I could hurt you if I wanted to.
Now, it is interesting that the Targums talk about this, and in the Targums, it is Michael that is being referenced here.
Mhm.
And in this passage about Michael, verse 26 says of this, and he saw that he had not power to hurt him. He touched the hollow of his thigh and the hollow of Jacob's thigh, and it was distorted in his contending with him. He said, "Let me go, for the calm of the morning ascendeth, and the hour comes when the angels on high offer praise to the Lord of the world. And I am one of the angels of praise. But from the day that the world was created, by my time to praise hath not come until now." And he said, "I will not let thee go until you bless me." So
Added a bit to that.
say again?
So it looks like they added a bit to that.
Yeah. What is a targum? Targum is translation with commentary to tell you why it says certain things. If you go in this idea of the importance of the phrase, and it was daybreak, is the idea that from tradition, the angels all meet for their morning, the cub, so to speak, in the morning to come together. Their commander's update brief, they get that, and they move out with their daily marching orders.
Well, daybreak, they do PT.
So why is the point? I guess it's interesting that there's a religious sect that believes that Yeshua and Michael are the same individual.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but you can see that.
Yeah.
That idea that this angel was Michael, and we're saying it's Yeshua, dates back to, first century, maybe even earlier, based on the Targum. As you remember, Targums were read alongside the Torah because people were familiar with Aramaic, but only knew Hebrew from a just reading the scriptures. It was not their conversational language for a long time after the exile from Babylon. So anyway, that's it's kind of the background on that. Any other questions or comments on the WWF match between the two? Was it real wrestling? Or was it fake wrestling? All in, all out. All right. No one could tag out. All right. Now the text here tells us that no longer be called Jacob.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. So here's a question. If he's no longer called Jacob, why then would we say, well, he doesn't get out of chapter 32, he's still being called Jacob? The angel incident ends, and then we have verse 31. The third reading of the portion says, Yaakov called the place Peniel, face of God. So what does it mean here? Her name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel? What is that talking about? Well, it's really a conundrum, but the commentators say that because of him essentially proving himself here, he doesn't deserve to be called deceiver anymore. That's what they're saying. That Yaakov started with hand on heel as the meaning of the word, but can also mean deceiver. And so, why is it that he's called that afterwards? There's multiple answers to that question, or multiple attempts to answer the question. I don't know if it's really answered, because we see Avraham not called Avram anymore, right? But we do see, and we don't see Yehoshua called Hosea anymore, but we do see Yaakov called Yaakov still after this event.
Usually when he's messing up.
It could be, but not always, because right here in this, he's not really messing up here when he says
No, not
calls the
yet.
place Peniel.
Yeah,
We're still using
not
the name
until
Yaakov.
it was reiterated a little further on. I'm wondering if it was because, let me see, where was the second one?
Well, that is another argument, that when Yaakov is messing up, he's called Yaakov. When he's doing right, he's called Israel.
Yeah, there was a verse that was read. I'm trying to figure out what it was. Oh yeah, here it is. 35, starting in 9. Your name is Jacob. You will no longer be named Jacob, but Israel will be your name. So he named him Israel. God also said to him, I am God Almighty, and a bunch of other stuff.
And then verse 14 says Yaakov set up a standing stone,
Yeah.
not Israel.
I'm wondering. The thing is
basically
verse
he's
21, it starts calling him Israel.
And then
I'm wondering, because the first one,
and then it says Yaakov had 12 sons.
in the first one, he was by himself with the other person, or with God man.
Well,
And the second one was, it appears that it was in front of others. So it was a declaration at that point, reiterating what was already the case, but was now to be, so others knew, because he couldn't just go ahead and start calling himself Israel.
so what does Jacob mean? Deceiver, right? Heel grabber, deceiver.
Mhm.
So the sages kind of argue that you no longer deserve to be called a deceiver because you have done this thing. So I think to reconcile this, it was more of a not that he was actually renamed and people from then on were going to start calling him Israel, is that he didn't deserve to be the deceiver anymore. He's paid for all that he's done wrong and has overcome. So he can be called one who strives. Say again?
Reputation change.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, reputation change, so to speak. And that's how the sages kind of present it, is that he's called Israel because of his reputation. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody that he knows is going to automatically start calling him Israel, because we see that that's not the case. In fact, he's still called Yaakov, even in the Ketuvim Netzarim, right?
In verse 21, it starts referring to him as Israel, but then it switches and says Jacob again in verse 23 and 27.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the idea, I think, that, this, I think there's a point in the Exodus narrative where Yehuda stands up and says, I'll go. I'm not Reuben. Reuben said, I'll send my son. Yehuda says, I'll go in place of Benjamin, right? That's kind of Yehuda's moment of taking leadership at that point. Here, deceiver is ruled out in a sense, because remember we talked about the 3 camps, right? In chapter 33. Yaakov divided the children between Leah, Rachel, and the 2 slave girls, between the slave girls first, and the children first, Leah and her children second, and Rachel and Joseph last. But then 33 verse 3, then he himself passed on ahead of them and prostrated himself on the ground 7 times before approaching his brother. Esau ran to meet him. So Yaakov separated the folks into camps, but he also then passed all the camps up and went to the front of the line. He wasn't hiding behind Rachel's skirts in camp number 3.
Right.
He went to the front. He led from the front to go and meet Esau head on, essentially by himself, leaving the camps behind him. So that demonstrated, in my view, the changeover. The event that just occurred was the wrestling. But it was a result of that wrestling, I think, that caused him to be changed, to stand up now and do what he's supposed to do.
Have the boldness to go.
Have the boldness to go forward and the
Wrestle
bravery.
with God and men. Now don't be afraid of Esau.
Yeah. It's interesting that in the passage talking about that, he says in 33:10, just seeing your face has been like seeing the face of God. He said that's Esau.
Yeah.
I always read that. It sounded like off the right one, KKV.
I'm looking at it as I wrestled with an angel.
I didn't make
What-
that connection.
What can you do to me? If I'm looking at you and seeing the face of God, you could argue said he might be, because he's going to give him gifts and things later. But it's also, I think, saying that in the sense of I have wrestled with an angel and prevailed.
There isn't anything you're going to do to me, Chief.
Yeah.
Get back on your little donkey and drive away.
All right, so we get to 33 verse 4. And if you're looking in a Torah scroll or Chumash, there are dots over all the letters in that. In chapter 33 and verse 4, Vayishlach, which is translated as, and he kissed him. And so there is a question about what do all the dots on top of that mean? And this is what the Torah says, or the Torah commentators say about it. Because really, there's the dots. There, in the Chumash, there is an asterisk next to it, but in the original text, there is not an asterisk. There's not a there's not an asterisk next to that. The commentators say that there's two different views, and in the Torah scroll there are dots over each letter of this word, an exegetical device that calls attention to hidden allusions. The sages disagree regarding the significance of the dots. Is that a surprise to you guys? Probably not. Some hold that
I've always been of the understanding that if you have 5 Jews in a room, you've got like 12 opinions.
Yeah. Some hold that Esau's kisses were insincere, but Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says that although it is an immutable fact or rule, rather, that Esau hates Jacob, at that moment his mercy was aroused and he kissed Jacob with all his heart. So one view is that the dots.
Doesn't Monty say it's like teeth?
Yeah, I think I think I hid the slide, but Monty says that the dots represent teeth, and so even though he was crying on his, as he kissed him, he was crying tears. He really wanted to bite his neck.
Yeah, with the gnashing of teeth.
And I would prefer that the way this really was is the idea that even Esau could be turned out. I don't have a slide that covers this, but it says Following the above view that Esau was genuinely moved by the sight of Yaakov, Rabbi Hirsch comments that one cannot cry unless he is genuinely moved, for tears flow from the innermost feelings. Esau's kiss, accompanied by tears, proved that he was more than a selfish, violent hunter. He too was a descendant of Abraham, who was capable of setting aside his sword in favor of humane feelings. So I would like that one to be the true side of it. I think Rabbi Hirsch has never heard of Hollywood, though, I guess, in terms of how sincere can tears be. Well, or rather, how insincere tears can be, perhaps. But was Esau acting here?
Then it goes back to the whole thing. If the messengers were actually angels, then Esau could have just been terrified.
Right. That's why he was so conciliatory. Even though
you can have tears of terror.
Yeah. I mean, there wasn't enough guys in this caravan to defend against 400 armed troops.
Right.
So they really were totally at Esau's mercy. Had it not been for perhaps all three of those courses of action, or the messengers going forward, the angels going forward, potentially.
Well, there were the angels, and then there were also the gifts with the servant bringing up.
But I mean, arguably, yeah, you can, if you want to fight for it, you can take all the gifts anyway, right? They're just basically free once you kill the people that own them.
And then he tried to refuse them, so that was.
Yeah. See, so there is that, and that says to me that the tears were real.
Yeah.
And not trying to bite his neck.
So if that's the way the sages interpret it there, what about all the other places in Torah that has dots above the word?
There's only a few that have dots above the word.
8 or 9,
Mhm.
maybe 7.
Yeah.
Those would have to mean the same things in interpretation.
Well, not if they're not crying, they wouldn't. This is over the word Vayishkayu, so it's over the word. It matters what the word is, probably. Oh, if that means teeth.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Monty's off base on that.
Well, it is one of the two views here, right? The two views are he meant it insincerely, which would be teeth, potentially, or really, and so.
But that makes it seem like we need to go check out the other ones to see if they meant, or when where those dots were was the meaning of the word about insincerity or not.
Yeah, potentially you could say that you could look at, but I'd say it doesn't just be, I mean, just because there's dots over the letter, it may not mean the same thing every time. I don't think you can say what this means this all the time and only this all the time.
And it's quite possible they don't mean anything.
Well, Nehemiah says there's scribal marks for some kind of textual reason.
And the kind of reason is
He said he calls them
wondering-
erasure marks.
Yeah,
erasure marks.
I'm wondering.
I know you don't like Nehemiah and all that, but
I don't dislike him.
you know, I like him just as much as anything else in the other sage is being brought out.
I mean, his comment does sound very rabbinical.
Well, he's not a rabbinical person.
I know, that's why it's funny that his comment sounds rabbinical to me.
That's why I hesitate to bring anything up here, because I listen a lot to him.
I think it's fine to bring it up. I'm not arguing with it. I'm just saying that's another one of the views, perhaps, is what it is. I mean, his view isn't that it means something, except that it is a textual.
Only means something to a sofer, right?
Yeah.
A sofer stomp.
And the thing is the meaning probably, I mean, considering you are one, and
I wish.
you're trying to be one.
Trying to.
It's a very good possibility that the meaning has been lost to time. They may have just been doing it for so long like that.
In my Tikkun Sofrim, it doesn't say what they're about. It just, I mean, they do appear there, and there's a little note that says, you know, make sure that one dot is centered over each of the letters, but it doesn't exactly say why.
Right.
So.
It's also possible that it's a be careful with this, or I mean, like in Psalms, he used Selah a lot, and he was just think on this or examine them,
Or pause.
have an understanding of this, or pause and or pay attention even. So I mean, there's any number of things it could mean.
Or how you sing it.
Yeah.
Or when you
A
stop.
musical term.
Mhm.
But it's canted.
But again, how it was sung in the temple, because typically there in Psalms, has been, I think, generally speaking, lost to time also. In terms of what
I have to believe that how it was sung in the temple has been lost
Mhm.
because they've essentially gone to something that sounds eerily like Gregorian chant.
So you're saying the Catholics have it right?
Because there were no recordings to see how it really sounded, right?
There's an X file that talks about one of the ancient recordings.
All right.
All right.
What slide are we on here?
We'll continue on to,
Slide 32.
yes, Sukkot.
Sukkos.
Jacob journeyed to Sukkos and built for himself a house and made booths. How come it says booths there and Sukkot in the other one? Well,
Because Sukkot means booths.
right. So the word there is also
Booths.
booths, right?
So he built himself a booth too. Why didn't he use booth instead of house?
He didn't build himself a booth. He built for himself a house.
And then he built Sukkot.
Built Sukkot for the livestock.
Booths, livestock.
Sukkot for the livestock. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't Sukkot, can it also mean the place you live?
Well, a sukkah is a temporary
Temporary
dwelling
dwelling.
place. Yeah. But he didn't seem like it's temporary in the sense he built house.
Maybe that meant to portray a more permanent thing.
Yeah, I think it does. But for the animals, it's not a house or even a barn, probably. It's a covering of sorts. And what the sages talk about this is that, well, first of all, we can say, number one, not every place called Sukkot in the Bible is talking about the biblical holiday, right?
Right.
And what the
There's one down near Egypt even, and I don't think it had anything to do with it.
well, I think the one near Egypt has probably more to do with it, but they're leaving Egypt when the first location, and all of the first place is called Sukkot that they stop, of the 42 stops. The interesting thing here is how come it's not called Beit something else, right? Why is it
House of the Cow.
well not House of the Cow, but why is it not called like Beit Yaakov or something like that? Something about the terrain they're building the house on. Why is it named for what you built for the animals?
Because it used up all the other names.
Well,
Either that or one of the little kids said, hey, why don't we name it after this thing?
again, here's a rabbinical opinion. It says, it seems strange that Jacob named the place for the animal shelters rather than for the houses he built for the people. Or Haim ben Moses ben Ibn Attar, suggests that this may have been the first time anyone took the trouble to shelter animals from the sun and cold. Until Jacob, shepherds considered livestock to be nothing more than a means for sustenance and profit. Because Jacob here made a public display of compassion for all living creatures, the place was named for that precedent-setting act.
Maybe he was just protecting his assets.
Maybe caring for the animals makes them healthier and brings more profit if you sell it.
Sure.
It's also still caring for
another
animals.
thing is remember he had huge. His gift was a bare drop in the bucket of his gift to Esau was a bare drop in the bucket to what he actually had. So, yeah, he may have built houses for the people, but his livestock, there would have been so many of them that there were probably sukkahs everywhere. And it's like sukkahs as far as the eye can see. So let's call it sukkah.
Or it's not called sukkah, it's called Sukkot because there's a lot of them.
Right.
So I've been thinking about, I don't have any real great evidence to back this up, but I've been pondering the fact that it could have been called a Sukkot because it's an ideal place for camping, to camp out and be there temporarily. There had to be water there. There had to be some food there. Of course, they had food with them. So I think there are multiple places called Sukkot. I think that those areas are suitable for camping out, especially when you need to.
Convenient places to stop on the way.
Just a personal opinion on that. Yeah. Not saying that's how it is. That's just saying how I've been thinking of it maybe the last couple of years.
Say it.
So that's like going down Route 66 and finding a town named Motel.
Yeah.
Now we get to Dinah or Dinah, the daughter of Leah. So what happened in this situation? I think what's going on here in terms of this scenario, we can identify a couple things that, as lessons learned here. Number one, we might ask the question, why was Dinah going out to visit the daughters of the land? What's she doing going out there?
Probably just hanging out, probably was like, I need to get away from the guys. I need to hang out with some girls. Because like you see Hollywood doing that a lot. It's just, I need some friends who are girls because I'm surrounded by guys 24/7.
Well, she doesn't meet, what the story isn't about her meeting the daughters. It's about meeting perhaps a brother of daughters, Shechem. He saw her, he took her, and he lay with her by force. Word there for laying with it by force is the word is anah.
Mine actually says rape.
Well, anah is the word for humiliated or violated. Yeah. But he was then we say he raped her, verse 2, verse 3. He was deeply attracted to her and wanted to, he loved the girl and spoke tenderly to her.
That makes things all better.
Yeah. So let's talk about what happened as a result of that. I don't have a slide on it, but what happened as a result of this? Well,
He got his entire, all the guys in his town got killed because of him.
now, yeah, that's true. Was it right to do that? And we look at it in a couple different ways, perspectives. Number one, what if, the proposal to basically join the peoples together, would they become all Israel or they become all Hivites eventually?
Well, they're going to be circumcised, so maybe all Israel.
Maybe.
And they were thinking the other way around. Because it's
Right.
like once
They were a small portion of, I think, the overall number of people that were there. I think the Hivites probably outnumbered Jacob and his sons and daughters by a lot.
Yeah. The thing is the guy did not seem apologetic. It's like, I had her once, I want to keep having her, so I want to marry her.
Well, sure.
And so
You might
he was,
recognize this. They're going.
Yeah.
They're pagans doing what pagans do, right?
Yeah.
Looking at this situation, was it right for the brothers to kill all of them?
I don't think so, because they were just supposed to be taught.
The father was not pleased with them. Had they not done that, though, the result could have been disastrous for Israel.
Could have been.
And looking at it, these courses of action thing, they plotted this out in advance, right? Why didn't they just say, well, okay, you can't marry our sister or our daughter until you, Shechem, are circumcised, and leave it at that? But they're going to join all the peoples together, and so they all get circumcised. So I think this was a pre-planned event, because when you think about it, if they had just said, okay, we'll get him circumcised, we'll be in pain, and we'll kill him on the third day,
They would have been overthrown easily.
then what would have happened? Yeah, the response would have been, okay, all you guys you're dead now.
They had to kill everyone.
If you're going to kill the son of the king,
Nothing type
Yeah.
deal.
it's It's a mess.
Yeah.
The, the,
Even though it
I'm not
was
entirely
probably
sure
not
there
the
were
right
good
thing to do, it
choices
worked out for the better.
available.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you're going against, and they're going against what their father said to do, to me, that's wrong. Now, yeah, it worked out good, but at that point, you don't know how it's going to work out.
Well, the agreeing to the proposal to join with this
That's another thing.
Pagan
They
group.
deceive-
they agreeing to this proposal that we can all join together, that is also going against what Abraham and Isaac and Jacob were told as well. Their descendants will be this, and they'll be a peculiar people, so to speak. Is what's going to happen. There'll be a separate people. They're not to be joining with this pagan tribe. I mean, you could say, well, we're going to convert them all. Is that what we're doing here? They were. I don't think that was going on here. It was with malice aforethought, so to speak, that they're doing it. Now,
Yeah.
that's why,
What happened turned out for the best. There weren't really many better choices. But it was they did go against their father's wishes, and yeah, it would have probably been very bad.
so
Yeah, but the entire reason why he told him not to was because he didn't want to make it, because he was afraid that if they went after them, all the other villages and towns would team up against them. He was afraid
So
of the other.
shouldn't
everybody else.
Dinah have went with perhaps one of her strong brothers to go with her, maybe two, as an escort to make sure that she doesn't have anything bad happen to her?
That would probably been a
Of course
wise
it should have.
decision. That would have probably been the best decision if
Coulda,
that
shoulda,
happened,
woulda.
But she probably thought she was safe.
Maybe.
You think she probably wanted to be with him at that point too?
We're not really told at all what her
It
feelings
does
were.
say it was forcible, so
Well, at first, yeah.
Yeah.
The rape was forcible.
right.
But then it sounds like she's with him all the time after that.
Well, she's with him when they come to kill him. She's with him in the same house. So, still, if you will, the circumcision happened, but they're already basically living together at the time.
It could be one of two things. Either she went well or she didn't.
In Israel,
Both are entirely possible.
the Israelites who were there, so to speak, the sons of Jacob who were there, might have,
I mean, this
knowing
sounds like
the
it actually
rules
does.
here, she's
It
with.
did sound like they were outside the Israelites were outside of the village. They were
Right.
camped outside of it.
Right, but I guess looking at it, the agreement was you get the girl if you get circumcised. So there wasn't really necessarily a time separation between getting circumcised and getting the girl. It doesn't say they were married per se, but she was at the place where it was.
No telling how much time had
He
passed.
probably just dragged her into his house and just kept her there.
It doesn't sound like she was a prisoner.
And she may have been, but it doesn't say whether or
Yeah,
not
it doesn't say.
it's.
Well, she didn't know. It says she didn't know the plan, right?
Right.
She thought the plan was circumcise all the guys, and I'm marrying this guy.
Yeah, and at the time she wouldn't have.
They
had
couldn't
a
tell her
choice
the plan because she'd leak it to the.
At the time she wouldn't have had a choice.
So she may,
The
in her
women
mind,
at that
have
time
resigned
really
to that
didn't-
fact.
Resigned,
She's gonna
yeah.
live there with him for.
Mhm.
Probably said, well, this is
Something.
my lot in life.
It's got traded for. What did I get traded for again? 35:2, change your garments. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, put away the foreign gods which are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments. So how long did it take them settling next to these Hivites, even though they just killed all the guys, to hitch up with foreign deities?
They did raid their houses immediately after killing everybody.
So this whole event here is pretty bad, I think, overall. So settling next to this large burgeoning population might look good on the ground, when you first do that. But then, what is all the downside of that? Well,
Assimilation.
assimilation, and that's exactly what Israel had a problem with throughout their history, right? So the idea of, there is a tradition that Israel did a mikveh prior to the 10 words, and the phrase "wash your garments" it's thought to be a phrase that would indicate not just washing your clothes, but actually taking a bath, so to speak, or doing a mikveh. And so the purification and change your garments might be what's going on.
They took a bath.
Yeah.
I did have a question. In verse 4, where Jacob did the false gods and earrings and whatnot, whoever read one type of tree, and mine says an oak.
Mine says pistachio.
Right. And,
The gods are buried under a pistachio tree. and
right.
then-
Mine says oak. That's why I was thinking.
Well, let's take a look.
It says oak. Under the oak in your second. But it also says oak in a few verses later. For the
Maybe they didn't want to tell anybody the real tree, so they wouldn't go get the treasure.
It's not a real tree, it's camouflage. Well, it's the ha'elah is the word there, and this the interlinear calls it terebinth.
Pine tree. It's a pine tree.
So we've got oak, we've got pistachio, and we got terebinth.
Terebinth means pine, is a pine tree. It's a type of pine tree.
The Hebrew word there is ha'elah. I'm not sure if that's specific to a particular tree. I'm not sure what.
Terebinth. You can go buy
Terebinth.
pine oil
Terebinth
today.
is,
It's called terebinth oil.
Mhm. But terebinth must not be related. Terebinth is a different word. Than ha'elah. So it may translate to that, but I'm not sure why they used terebinth here as a translation for that. So I would say it's a third type of tree that's being supposed here in that.
I think they just don't want anybody to know the tree is buried.
Well, that way they can't go dig up those idols, right?
Yeah.
Start worshiping them.
Might be a little hard to find now.
Yeah. Probably weren't a lot of metal involved, I'm guessing.
Buried all under one tree.
So our things about ending here with these are the records, the toldot of Esau. Esau took his wives and the daughters of Canaan, Adah of Elon the Hittite, Oholibama, the daughter of Anah, and the granddaughter of Zibeon the Hivite. Esau is Edom, and it says Oholibama is the daughter of Anah, but Anah is also what Shechem did to Diana. I should say Dinah there, not Diana.
Yeah.
It's a typo. So that's interesting. But I don't know if Anah means force or rape in Canaanite language. I think that is all I have in terms of slides. Any questions from online or anything?
No.
Okay.
Just quickly say that. He went like this. No.
No. I'm looking at it.
As in, don't
Yes.
stop. Don't ask questions.
Nobody has.
All right, well, let's pray. Abba, thank you for allowing us to midrash on your word. Thank you for the freedom to do that. And we thank you for the blessing it is to be here together as we close out Shabbat. We thank you in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen.